What the fuck is up, people? This is Bread and Circuses. My name's Caleb Salvatore.
It's Nick Kohler.
Over here with Nick Kohler, we are with our guest, Arvin Vohra. He is an educational entrepreneur, candidate for president, and he says some controversial stuff, kind of like we do.
Yeah, everybody does.
How's it going, man? We wouldn't have him on.
It's going well. It's going well. How are you guys doing tonight?
Pretty
yeah,
good.
I'm doing pretty good. It's there's a lot of stuff to talk about, I think, going on right now.
The world is kind of a shit show.
A little bit. Arvin, one of the main things I was telling Caleb and Zach here about that I really wanted to have a kind of a long discussion about was this stuff going on with social media censorship. Like you are going to come from the libertarian camp, right? Of like zero, nobody messing around government wide of telling these companies of what they can and can't do. But I really do want to hear your stance on it. So
yeah. So I mean, what is the censorship telling us, right? It's you don't censor people unless their ideas are problematic, to your status quo. So when I look at this censorship, to me, right now it's a nuisance, but it's also great news. Because every single one of these groups has been, whether you're looking at Reddit, whether you're looking at Facebook, all these groups are being censored, which lets us know that the people with way more money to do media research know that we're a threat. To address the policy question, I don't think the government should be involved in censoring Facebook for censoring people. I think this is something where we need to take control of it and say, okay, this is stuff they're doing. We're not going to support that. We're going to support other groups, MeWe, Minds, etc.
Yeah, I think it'd be a really concentrated effort on people. Like people really need to organize to do this because like from what I was hearing, like with Minds and everything, like Google is like purposely like removing it from their search engine. And so is Mozilla and everything. And it's like, man, that's going to be really Minds.
I have the app on my phone.
Do you?
Yeah. I didn't know they were.
Well, because like apparently like if you try to search it up on like a Google search or a Mozilla Firefox search or anything, it's going to like be hidden behind a bunch of other stuff.
Right.
Yeah. And then they're doing it on purpose, though, right? I mean, you have the sort of the big government left-wing type groups, right? You have Google, you have Facebook, Twitter. I mean, these are all pro-welfare state groups. And they're seeing, people, there are a lot of these sort of groups that are all anti-state for various reasons. You have libertarian groups, the ANCAP groups, men's rights groups, super anti-state, alt-right groups, super anti-state. These are all groups that they've been censoring. But then the one commonality, even though we're talking about vastly different cultures, vastly different demographics, is each of these groups opposes the welfare state in all its forms. So we can see that threat, right?
When you say the welfare state, how do you define that? Because I think a lot of our listeners won't. They'll be confused.
The welfare state is just something that provides any kind of money or service to people who didn't pay for it. So government schools, that's part of the welfare state. Food stamps, that's part of the welfare states. Having a much larger military than we need to turn the military, which should be a defense program, into a jobs creation program, that's part of the welfare state. Government jobs that aren't needed, though, that's and anything where you're paying, corporate welfare, that's part of the welfare state. Anything that basically maintains this status quo with stolen money, that's the welfare state to me. Okay.
Gotcha. So I just wanted to clarify. I mean, I had a good idea of what you were going to say. Obviously, you can see the ink on my shoulder, so I kind of know. But
well, that's an interesting discussion in and of itself because if having the discussion about what actually, if the government even has any right to do anything, I mean, we said the military is something that should only be around just for self-defense, but I mean. It's really weird when it comes to these companies because we want to say that they're not, what you had said, the corporate welfareism, like they receive money from the government. Like you always talk about it, Caleb, about how like Facebook receives government subsidies. And
lots of them.
Yeah. And I've actually never really looked into that. Have you actually looked into that?
I can't find the exact numbers, but I know it's in the at least tens of millions that they get from the government. You
have to look at like Twitter too. I mean, Twitter has all the politicians like literally on their website using them as like their biggest public platform. So
right.
And so that makes Twitter much like the traditional media very much on the side of keeping the status quo alive, keeping the status quo going. That's what they're about. Whatever anti-authoritarian, anti-establishment aspects they might have had in their early days have been gone for a long time.
Yeah.
And, you see Twitter's now, cooperating with the FBI or cooperating with it. Social media shouldn't be cooperating with the government at all. there should be a total separation between media and state. That's what freedom of the press is about. There's not supposed to be cooperation. The press is not supposed to cooperate with the government. Yeah, maybe the government should cooperate with the press, but that is not a two-way street. Freedom of press means that the press does not cooperate with the government at all.
Right. So, I mean, back into the welfare state thing, I guess, what would you say would be like your ideal amount of government? Would you say none at all?
None.
None?
Yeah,
Just completely gone. Okay.
Yeah, the only things that it touches, it just turns into garbage. You know, as an educator, I am a big proponent of education, but the single worst thing to happen to education is government schools. And that's what it does in education. It does that in defense. I mean, in trying to defend us, what ends up happening is currently we, Americans, are subsidizing socialism for Europe, and that hurts Americans, but it also hurts Europe. It's making Europe socialist. So any well-intentioned thing, whether it's education or safety or defense, the government makes it worse. So I don't think the government can be involved at all.
That's always been one of my big things when people try to cite European socialist states as a successful socialist state. And I'm like, well, you do realize that they are able to put all of this tax money into doing these social programs because they don't have anything else to worry about, because America is like their backbone. Like, they don't have to worry about defense spending. They don't have to worry about even like stuff like putting in money for traveling or anything like that. Like, America puts so much money into Europe to maintain them as an ally. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, if you look at the early United States and Europe, you see that you're basically dealing with the racial demographics, the cultural demographics of the two places are the same, right?
Right.
But while every innovation, every major invention, every step forward comes out of America, nothing comes out of Europe.
Well, I mean, Europe's a lot wider than us.
Proof of socialism failing right there. You can see that you take the same people, same culture, same grandparents, same everything, give one socialism, give one a little bit less socialism, and that leads to that innovation and growth and all the amazing things that have come out. I mean, Europe is proof of the failure of socialism, because they should be as innovative and as successful as America, and they aren't.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I never actually thought of that as like, yeah, Europe hasn't really done anything on the world stage, like innovating technology or anything, in like a pretty hot minute.
Anytime you hear about Europe, they're killing each other. And
I know, right? That's what Europe used to be really good at, was killing each other. Not so much anymore, but
no. So what do you think would be a good alternative to public schools? I mean, because there's a lot of people that are dependent on it right now, and they're very used to it. It's like you can't really weed an alcoholic.
I mean, there's a difference between being, I mean, you're right, dependent, but not dependent in a good way. I mean, you can be dependent on a narcotic, you can be dependent, chemically dependent on a painkiller. So are they dependent in that sense? Yes. But I don't think they're dependent the way you might say that, in the modern era, a lot of us are dependent on plumbing and electricity, because those things make our lives better. They are addicted to something that's hurting them, and it's hurting their kids even more than it's hurting them. Education, one of the things that I hear so many parents say, I've heard so many parents say this to their kids, which is, I know that your math teacher this year, like the entire year, isn't very good. Right. But go ahead and just try to stick with it for a year. And then hopefully, not guaranteed, but maybe next year's teacher will be better. That is the most toxic approach to education I can imagine, saying your education is so unimportant that I'm gonna let you suffer and learn nothing for a year because I've gotten used to the system. So I don't think they're positively dependent on it at all. I think it's something that's hurting them. It's hurting their kids even worse.
Well, you have an educational company. So
I do, yeah.
What's the theory behind it? Because I know there's a lot of different theories behind education. I took classes for briefly in college.
Sure. The theory behind our company comes down to really, I would say, one principle, which is individualization.
Right.
So our curriculum is composed of thousands of separate pieces, separate modules, but no individual student sees more than 50 or 60 of them. It lets us really, at a lower cost than tutoring anyway, create a totally individualized situation. And the great thing is, I look at my competitors. I'm in private education. I'm not saying, oh, I hate those guys. I'm like, okay, what they're doing works for their clients, and a lot of it's innovative. And sometimes we even borrow some of it. Sometimes we just license. I mean, it's not that we're just stealing it, but sometimes it's something where we can have mutual respect, right? But when I see what's happening in public schools, to me, that is a travesty. There's nothing. It's not like here's a way to do it. I'm like, here's a way to never do it ever, no matter what.
I think it's interesting on the point of the public schools, like their failures, is because I think that's something that most intellectual people that are thinking about it will agree on, is that this public school system is just a trash heap right now.
No, I completely agree on the individualization, that there's way too many public schools. They think that there's one be all fix all for every student, and that's just not the case. You can't fit a square peg into a round hole, and that's what they try to do.
And what you see, I mean, to me, you know, when I'm meeting with clients for the first time, you know, I say, you know, if you give the same education, the same thing to everyone, that would be like if you went to a doctor who's just giving the same medicine to everyone. I mean, that person would be run out of town as just a danger to, even if there's no government, the people would run that person out of town as a general danger and a menace. And when I see that happening in schools and, you know, government schools, everyone getting the same treatment, it's the same thing. People are more different in their minds than they are in their bodies. And if you give them the same treatment in their minds, it is more neglectful than giving everyone the same medicine for their bodies. I
think a good example of it is where you'll see these younger students, third grade, right? He's way farther than all of his other classmates, right? And they're not going to let him go at his rate, so they almost dumb him down to be how they are at the bottom level, and that really hinders, people.
Or they do the other thing, because when I was in elementary school, and this is arguably worse what they did with me, I was considered a high ability learner. I was very much above the rest of my classmates in math through about fourth grade.
Sure.
So in third grade, they decided they were going to put me in HAL math, high ability learning. They put me in that, and they just sent us off on our own. So what we learned from that was don't ask for help. I never asked for help in math, and then I struggled the rest of my time in school.
Oh, yeah.
It's interesting when you see a lot of the honors programs, the magnet school programs, they are so clearly designed to just essentially shut up the people who would be the real problem. I mean, people always say, you know, teachers, you know, people who are not teachers will say the problem students are going to be the D students. That's wrong.
No.
D students are afraid of teachers. The problem students are the A students.
Yeah.
And you have these honors programs that are just designed to be intimidating, to just shut them up, right?
Yeah.
And you see magnet schools, like TJ, Stuyvesant, all these, they don't do stuff faster, right?
Right.
It still takes a whole year to do Algebra 1. It still takes the same amount of time to do everything, but they just make it scarier and more intimidating. We've looked through a lot of those curricula, and they are poorly designed. They're not good curricula. They're just there to scare people into submission, which, of course, is the thing the government is very good at.
Well, and we talked about it when we had Dan Berman on here a couple weeks ago. We talked about how they've completely redone the math formulas and everything, and the methods for long division and multiplication. Yeah. And it's almost like they're trying to teach the kids not to trust their parents, and that the government actor, you know, the teacher, cop, whatever the case may be, is who you need to go to.
Yeah, and you know, the family is the unit that can stand against the government, whether it's a nuclear family, extended family, you know, large tribe, whatever. That's the government's enemy, and anything they can do to create dissension within the family is what they do. Harry Brown wrote about this a lot, and why government doesn't work. He talked about how the teachers specifically try to indoctrinate the kids in ways where they're going to be sitting there and, like, you know, yelling at their parents about recycling and all that, you know, which now we know half the time recycling isn't even happening. They just dump it in a landfill anyway. Right. But the point is they try to create that division between parents and kids, because the family is the thing that historically has stood against the state. The Magna Carta was signed because powerful families stood against the state, and breaking up the family takes away the state's opponent.
Right.
I wonder, so how do you think that the private schools, and obviously you probably have to make the public schools just way less prevalent, how would they be more reachable, I guess, to people in smaller income?
The inner city?
Yeah, like because that's really where you see the most problems in public schools.
That's a lot of people's setback, is the inner city.
And that's one of the area that's so key. You know, people say right now private schools are so expensive. I'm like, well, yeah, if you have a free alternative, you're not going to. It wouldn't make any sense to try to target. If you want to look at a better example, you might want to say, like, can poor people go to grocery stores? You know,
that's true.
Are there ways that poor people can cook food at home? And you'll say, well, yeah, of course. I mean, why wouldn't there be? And so right now, yeah, you know, you have private schools with, like, you know, 50, 60, 70 acre campuses and pretty trees and, you know, all these buildings. But that's catering to a specific group, right? It's just like if everyone in the world wanted to play golf, you wouldn't have country clubs for everyone. You'd have something else. I mean, you have
you
have
everybody shopping.
You have all that kind of stuff. And with education in the free market right now, you already have so many alternatives. You have Khan Academy and Coursera, all these things that are totally free. You have things that are low cost like Kumon. I mean, like my program, Vohra Method. No one thinks it's low cost, certainly. But again, it's not like $80,000 a year or the way a lot of private schools are. So the point is there are different things at different levels, and those naturally emerge once you remove the thing that's paid for by force.
It was like you saying like, no, there's the Whole Foods and then there's Walmart. So, but you're, all private,
Right.
but
Yeah.
I would say because homeschooling, actually, they found homeschooling is actually super cheap.
Yeah.
And I wonder why, the inner city schools, I mean, why don't they just push homeschooling in inner city if they're so worried about it? Like
a lot of the time, the inner city kids don't have parents who care enough to homeschool them.
True.
That I think is a lot less true than people think, right? Like you find like one parent who has 15 kids and is cracked out on something. And you try to kind of say like, well, this is the quintessential inner city parent, but that's not. I mean, there's a lot of inner city parents that have given up with fighting with their school boards, and homeschooling actually is growing now in the inner cities.
Oh, cool.
But the simple fact is you have teachers unions that are trying to keep those families hostage. They're sacrificing the education of those kids so they can keep their political dominion essentially. So what we need to be doing is helping encourage people, showing that this is a real option, that you can do better than a teacher who simply doesn't care about your kids, that you know more and presumably care more about your kids than any teacher is going to. And that's why homeschooling has been so effective, because homeschooling, it's done by amateurs, right? I mean, it's not done by professionals, and yet it's outperforming the stuff done by indifferent professionals who are being misled by backward state curricula.
Well, I do think there are some teachers, quite a few teachers, their heart is in the right place. I think they do care about the kids, but I think so too. I think
that's similar to doctors too. I think there's a lot of doctors whose hearts are in the right place, but when you look at the state of the medical system in the United States, it's like, I mean, who does it fall upon? That's where the real question is.
Yeah, I mean, the intent is great, but you can't just, to paraphrase Milton Friedman, you can't judge a program by its intention. Yes, people become teachers with the intent of educating, and a lot of the good ones, they spend their time, they effectively outsmart and outfight the nonsense Common Core programs and other things, and they just break all the rules and they just do their own thing. And those people are heroes, sure.
Right.
But why should somebody have to spend all their energy, breaking all the commandments, coming from the government? Why not just have it where they could use that energy, instead of getting up to level 0, to start at 0 and then go to the sky? That's what I want to see. And that's what happens in the private sector. You're not held back by this kind of nonsense.
I remember in my high school, the first actual ever self-profused libertarian person I ever met was an English teacher I had in my high school. Yeah. Huh. And he would tell us about all the time how he would get basically slap on the wrists from our principal and superintendent because he would do stuff that wasn't following the curriculum. But his classes were known in our school to be the hardest ones to do and the most rewarding, I thought. You had to pick to be in his classes. You had the free choice to do it. And if you went in there, man, it was no holds bar. He was assigning you homework to do over the summer, to go into that class. So nice. It was good. It was rewarding to be in that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I agree with what you're saying in principle about public schools being broken. But you did mention earlier, that family with one mom, 15 kids, and she's cracked out. So what should we do? I mean, do we as a society have some type of duty to do something about these kids? Or, I mean, what's the solution?
Yeah, those people are the bottom line.
It's
a tricky situation, right?
It's an outlier, right? Because it's rare, but it does happen.
Yeah, it does happen. So here's the question that I pose is, how does she have that second kid, right?
Right.
First time you have a kid and you're just oh my God, and then you struggle and you sell your kidneys to pay for the kid and you do whatever it takes, right? And then you don't make that mistake twice. There have been, as they say in the olden days, unfortunate girls for all of human history, but unfortunate girls in the past had a kid. They didn't have 15 of them.
Right.
Because they felt the pain of that first kid so sharply, the biological drive to protect that kid at all costs, even at your own health, that the second one, there was no second one.
But statistically, they noticed that single mothers shot way up in like the 60s because of they had welfare. Like,
really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's really when it started to become a really big problem, is because that's when welfare stuff was really starting to get introduced in the United States.
It's like the Outcast song, "Your baby is a baby, not a paycheck." That's fucking tax return money.
Yeah. Tax return money, getting money from the government for food stamps, like getting money to take care of the child. Like,
right. And think about this. I mean, you get the same amount of food stamps for you get a decent amount of food. How much does a baby eat? Like, realistically, I mean, that baby eats like stewed carrots, and that's not that it's not that hard to make, and B, it's not this like massively expensive thing. The food stamps are there for the moms. That's what they're for.
Right.
And that's the kind of stuff where you see people in various, and this is across different races, across different parts of the country. I know the traditionals, like the inner city minority mom. I've seen it happen in rural areas with white moms, where the plan A is to get knocked up by somebody so you can get your welfare check. And that needs to stop. And that's only going to stop if people face the full consequences of their adult decisions. And I fundamentally believe that having sex and having kids, both of those are adult decisions. And if you are not ready to pay for the consequences of your adult decisions, don't make adult decisions.
Right. But I mean, it just kind of sucks because the kids are the ones that suffer.
Yeah, the kids are. Yeah, I think you're 100% right. And
the mom gets money.
Yeah, the money gets. It's funny. You look at kids kind of today, like maybe 15, 20 years from now, you're never going to know, or kids aren't going to know the meaning of what a shotgun wedding is. Like, how often, I mean, seriously, how frequently do you know, let's see in your life, that when somebody gets knocked up, like there's just the expectation is like, oh, well, you guys fucked up. Now you're getting married. Like,
no, it doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, it really doesn't.
Rare. I mean, I've seen it, but not often.
Yeah.
No, it's not near as much. Yeah, because it used to be you knock somebody up, you're together. Now it's single dads from the Midwest. We can talk about it.
Yeah.
But so I'm with you 100% on the government schools, and I think what you just said over the last 20 minutes is very sensible. And I think a lot of people that are maybe on the edge or don't know can find at least some common ground with you. But I think where you lose some people is with some of the comments, like when you said that school shootings weren't okay, but school board shootings were. I mean,
so let's talk a little bit about some of those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. The school board thing, I apologize for that instantly, and I gave an actual apology. Now that was on a private group in MeWe. I was trying to be funny. It was late at night, and it was just a stupid joke, and I apologize.
Okay. I didn't know that. I posted edgy shit in private groups.
Yeah. My thing about that is, like, I don't ever want to bring anybody on here and just have them apologize about shit. Because it's like, who the fuck cares, dude? It's like you said, it was something you were saying in a private group with some people, and it was clearly a joke. Like, nobody had a
well-delivered joke, but if you
I mean,
70 rando anti-state jokes a day, stupid, and that. So here's the thing. I mean, people have often called me out for giving non-apologies in order to drag out a controversy. And yeah, of course I do that. I do that on purpose because I want the controversy to continue. If I think a controversy is just unnecessary, another one that came up. I'd shared a post about how somebody had posted something like, my ancestors' blood was so pure that it wouldn't clot, right? And somebody else said, my family, there's hemophilia in family, that's kind of an insensitive thing. And I took it down like 5 seconds later because I was like, I didn't want that debate. That it just wasn't significant. So it wasn't my post, it was a post that I'd shared, but I also took it down right away because I didn't want that debate. Other things, going after the military, talking about age of consent, talking about government schools, those debates I absolutely do want. I want those debates to last for years because those are central debates that are at the heart of libertarian philosophy. So when I do apologize, when I actually apologize, I'm happy to do so. But when I'm doing fake apologies, it is intentionally there to antagonize people and stretch that controversy out as long as humanly possible. So,
I don't think people actually have discussions about hot topic stuff like that unless they're feeling uncomfortable.
That's an edgy topic, though.
Yeah.
I mean, let's talk about that, the age of consent thing. So what's the base for your philosophy on that?
Yeah.
Sure. So there's two parts of that, right? There's a strategic part and there is a moral part. And so
Right.
I'll do the simple. The strategic part is simple. In 2008, the Libertarian Party had the opportunity to get one of the best candidates we've ever had in the history of the party. That was Dr. Mary Ruwart to be our candidate.
Okay.
And we had Bob Barr, Wayne Root, the two worst options we've probably ever had to be all as our competition. And they picked Bob Barr and Wayne Root, right?
Right.
And it was so shocking. I mean, it was so amazing that someone with, she had the party history. She was like an international author. Her books are read in even in government schools, but also in good schools. And and they didn't pick her. And I looked historically why. That was the issue. She talks about every issue. She talks about it openly. They, at the last minute brought up her position on things like age of consent. They got it into Time magazine. They created such a hoopla. The executive director at the time resigned. I mean, it was such a big thing, right?
Right. And
it was because they like jammed it at the end when everybody was panicked, right?
Right.
So I knew that all they would need to do is use the exact same strategy on me. They would just have to say, Arvin, do you think the government should be involved in age of consent? And I would say, no, that's ridiculous. I don't want a government. I certainly wouldn't want to create one just for one stupid law. So I brought it up 2 years in advance because I wanted to discuss it in the strategic sense. So there's the strategic issue. To me, more important, there's the moral issue, which is at the heart of our whole philosophy. We have to think about two questions, which is one, what everything we do is based on consent.
Right.
And two, what makes somebody an adult? Because consent is meaningful in the context of adulthood. And to me, adulthood is based on doing adult things, providing for yourself, having a house or apartment or having a job, having a way to provide for your kids. That to me is what makes somebody an adult. And whether you do that when you're 12 or whether you do that when you're 50, that's when you should be having kids. That's when you should be having the kind of sex that has any possibility of producing kids. I don't think that anybody should be that the way we treat it right now, which says like, well, as long as you're over a certain age, you can just start having as many kids as you want and other people will pay for it. No, that's wrong. That is not being adult. Adulthood is based on doing adult things. And that's a central issue for our philosophy. If we can't wrap our head around adulthood and consent, then we can't really get to the heart of what we're even talking about.
Even on a less controversial way of just flat out saying there shouldn't be any age of consent laws, like states can't even agree on what the age of consent is. It's not universal.
True, right?
Yeah, it's not even universal across the world. In Mexico, it's like 14.
I agree.
Like
it's
not universal across the world. It was actually interesting. I did learn a lot of interesting things. So in ancient Rome, there was no age. Age was determined by your family, right?
Right.
And it was basically more like an age of marriage than age of random having sex with random strangers. It was more like that. In Germany, the age of consent is low, but below a certain age, if the younger party, whether it's a man or woman, feels that they were manipulated and taken advantage of, then they can take the older person to court. So there are other ways of looking at it. The current way that we do in the United States with the different states having different ages, as you just point out, that shows that it's stupid, right? That shows that it's arbitrary.
I agree. It's a sticky issue.
I think it's a sticky issue because it comes to the ways where people can take advantage of it. And I know personal experience of somebody that's been just totally donged by the fucking law because of like a statutory rape clause, like of where he had a girlfriend that was 17 and he was 18 and they, did what teenagers do. And then the parents didn't like it and took the kid to court. Now he's in jail as a sex offender.
I think everyone can agree that's ridiculous. Yeah. And I will agree with you on the point that it's tough to find that line of where it's no longer ridiculous. I can I think
it's hard to find the line though. I mean, the line is if you can do adult things, if you can provide for yourself and if you can provide for your kids, you're an adult. Right. And if you can't, you're not.
So if a 37-year-old had sex with a 13-year-old, I think most of us can agree that would be
I think everybody would agree that that's unacceptable.
I mean, to me, the question is this: is the 13-year-old does that 13-year-old have a job and a house and a way to pay for kids?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, chances are probably not, right? I mean, there's no chance.
So what happens?
You look at it more of like the ability more than the number itself.
Yeah. Because, I mean, when I was 13, I was taking a college course, getting an A in it. I mean, I wasn't ready to have sex because I didn't have a house and a car and a job and any way to provide for kids. Right. But there is more to adulthood than your specific age. There are things you need to do. Adulthood to me, you see those ridiculous shirts that say like, I cannot adult today. I think there's an underlying truth. Yeah. Which is adulting is a thing you do. It is not based on your age. Somebody could have Down syndrome. They could be 35 years old and they could be mentally at the age of a 5 or 6 year old. I mean, what are we gonna say? That person's an adult? No, of course not. I mean, taking sexual advantage of somebody like that would be, unconscionable. Right. And yet our current statutes say, well, yeah, that's an adult, I guess. I mean, no, that's not an adult.
So in the event that the 37-year-old sleeps with the 13-year-old girl, he's clearly taking advantage of what does happen to that guy.
So are we saying that this is a 13-year-old who has a house and a job and a car?
No, she can't. I mean, she can't. She's in middle school. She can't.
Yeah.
So we're talking about it. So now you're talking about a child, right?
Right. Yeah.
So what you're describing is an actual child. Like that is a child, right?
Right.
That is not a child that has any business giving consent. That child, in my opinion, does not have the moral capacity for consent. So at that point, we have to say, well, is there a wrong party? Yeah,
right.
There is. The 13-year-old, in my opinion, in that situation is the wrong party.
I think the 13-year-old or the older guy?
I would say the 13-year-old has been wronged in that situation.
Wrong. Oh, I thought you meant she was wrong. Okay.
I think it comes down to there seems to be this thing where younger people want to have all of the nice, cool things about being adults, but not have with none of the consequences or none of the negative things about being an adult. I mean, like honestly, being an adult kind of sucks sometimes, man, because it's like working for yourself as opposed to like working for some other company or something like that. Like you're literally most of the time on your own. And I think a lot of people can agree a fucking 13-year-old is not able to do that. Like no matter
not in today's day and age.
Yeah.
I would say most 14-year-olds also can't do that. And I would say most 18-year-olds and most 19-year-olds can't do that. And most 20-year-olds can't do that. Right. I think that things like sex should be based on your actual maturity, which is based on, do you have a job? Can you provide for kids? Like if you can't provide for kids, or if your spouse can't provide for kids, if there's not some legitimate way to provide for kids, then you should not have sex at all.
I think it comes to just a problem in general with American laws that they're very specific. I mean, I know a legal system that how it worked in like ancient world, like some of the first civilizations, their laws were vague on purpose and they relied more on judgment calls and wisdom of actual like judges as opposed to laws.
Again, and that highlights the issue with the sex offender registries. The guy who made a drunken mistake and pissed in an alley on New Year's Eve downtown is now in the same boat as the serial child rapist. And I think that's a huge problem too.
And this is what happens. Like we have these emotional issues when people are afraid to address them. Here's a recent example. When people are afraid to address them, we get something like the child sex doll ban that went unanimously through Congress. And yes, that includes Justin Amash, unless he sat out that one vote. It went unanimously through Congress, through the House. It was a unanimous vote to spend the limited law enforcement resources between that we can spend either on actual child rapists like you're talking about versus dolls, which are just like a doll, who cares? That you end up with a misallocation of resources because every congressman is too afraid to broach this, tricky issue. And yeah, I get it. It's an unsettling issue, and child sex dolls is kind of weird and gross. But that doesn't change the fact that there is no real crime because there's no real victim.
Right, and I admire people who will adamantly stand on their principles because I mean it's like I don't disagree that those should be or shouldn't be illegal. I mean it's not a person, obviously. But I think what a lot of congressmen, they might agree with you on that, but you're taught to die on the hill or to pick the hill you want to die on in the court of public opinion. And I just don't think they're willing to risk their career for that.
I think that's a problem in public discourse in general, because people think that like government resources are unending and they treat it like it is. Yeah, and what you say about limited resources is a wholehearted thing. That's why we're like have a $10 trillion deficit, is because people just don't want to look at stuff and be like, all right, do we really need that? Like, come on.
Right.
I mean, you can when I think about any spending, right? I think about what are the alternatives. Sure, you can spend $1 billion going after child sex dolls, and at the end of it, you'll probably have fewer child sex dolls, or you'll have a black market. More likely, you just have a black market in child sex dolls, right? Fine.
Right.
Could you spend that money to feed a starving kid? Yeah, there are starving kids. Could you spend that money to go after real criminals? Yeah, there are real criminals. Could you spend that? Is there something you could do better? If the answer is yeah, every single thing you could ever think of would be better, then I say yeah. I get that there's emotions at stake.
Yeah. So if the U.S. government
don't care about your feelings.
Yeah, if the U.S. government spent $10 billion to enforce this child sex doll law, as opposed to maybe $10 million to actually combat like child sex trafficking,
which is a huge problem.
Yeah, which is a humongous
especially
problem.
On the border.
Yeah.
And if you look at where's the worst child sex trafficking happening right now in America, it is through the government-run foster care system. I mean, that has turned into an epic tragedy, which the media is barely covering because they don't want to say anything bad about the government. And yet, it's not like this. It's not a secret. I mean, it's something that everyone knows. It's been it has been written about, not enough, in my opinion. But there's no circumstance that I can imagine where somebody says, we have $100, we can spend it on one thing. What should we do? And somebody says, yeah, child sex dolls.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point. We could actually talk about this, about just the fucking blunder that is like the U.S. adoption and foster system, because I know a lot of specifics as to why it's messed up, because me and my wife have actually looked into it and just, looked through it and through just at the process itself. Right. And we've known people that have gone through it, like just the fact of like, because it's so heavily regulated, because obviously it's the intent thing. They want to make sure that children aren't going into bad homes. The intent's there, right? But what you actually get is you can't even like start the process of like adopting a child or getting a child in the system without spending like $5,000 to $10,000 like minimum just to start the process. Yeah. And like, given the fact that you even get the child, like, I mean, you have to go through all this bureaucratic red tape and everything just to like get the child signed up in like a high school sport, or get the child in a sport if they want to do it. Like it's like almost impossible.
Think about that. $10,000. That's enough for the entire child's homeschooling.
Right.
Like that could be all of the homeschooling. And that's where I strongly believe that the whole system should be purely private. Whether the person with the child say like, listen, I'll pay you whatever to raise a child, or the person who wants a child say, listen, I'll pay you for your child, or they just do it for voluntarily. I don't care how, but at some point we have to realize that most people who are the biological parents will try to find somebody they think is reasonable. I mean, it's an instinct even little kids have when they're, giving their dog up for adoption. They still want to know that the dog is going to have a nice home. That's like a 5-year-old with a dog has that instinct. I guarantee you 99.99999% of biological mothers with their infants will have infinitely greater impulse to make sure that child finds a good home.
Or even not, private companies are held a lot more accountable than government institutions.
Example, at the Yelp reviews.
Yeah,
that could be
seriously
better.
You could, yeah. Could you imagine that though? Yelp reviews of they sold my son to a crackhead.
No, it'd be more of like the people like, I tried to buy a son from this person and it turns out that they just had a pillow stuffed with people. It wasn't even a real child. Would not go back. I took my business elsewhere.
Took my business elsewhere.
But it's really strange that people like don't even want to have that discussion, because I mean, when it comes down to it, like when government regulation, it is kind of, I see it as like a slide bar that goes whether it's too much or too little or something like that. And that's why I kind of consider myself a centrist. And I'm always open to have the discussions with the libertarian types, because I'm always up for discussions. How can we have less government regulation? Because personally, I believe it should only be, because I think like it should only be there for the stuff that it has to be there on. It's like, why does it have to be on there? Because somebody had a good idea, Ferry, of, but what if they get signed up for a school sport that they are not, they don't want to be in? It's like, what if we have to provide money for an injury for something like that? It's like, Come on, dude, really? Like nobody had the wisdom to just tell that dude, like, come on, really, dude? No.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, these are solutions in search of non-existent problems. There's already normal, just the free market, your natural human instinct. There's so many things that are there to do this. And the fact that we have the people who, I mean, there's no place on earth that has more, inside of America, that has more sex abuse and sex trafficking than the foster care system. That's the government managing it. The only place that has more sex abuse than the foster care system is the prison system, which has even more government management. Government is not the answer here. Get anyone else but the government is going to do it less bad.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, the military has a lot of sex abuse too, doesn't it?
And military, that's also true.
Yeah, it does. It's not as much as it used to be, but I think the reason why it wasn't was because there wasn't any oversight, and there wasn't. It's just like one of the biggest problems with government anything is that there's no oversight. There's nobody to hold anybody accountable for it. So, and like they tried like changing how they view it. Like it's just not much works. And obviously you get the issues that it's hard to solve it in the military because you'll get people that will try to falsify that kind of stuff for a gain, which I think happens just universally in any kind of situation.
They exist.
Yeah. So, but then you have to treat, I mean, like how the military treats it is like, well, those people, they have to spend all these resources to make sure every claim is legitimate. So.
Yeah. And that's a major tragedy. I mean, you have so many. Now, I'm not a fan of military enlistment. I think that joining the military right now is morally absolutely the wrong decision to make, but it's well-intentioned.
Right.
And you have so many young men, so many young women who go into the military who are trying to, they're trying to do something good. I mean, they're ending up doing something idiotic, but they're trying to do something good. And the fact that they're going there, there's such a high rate of assault and no one is just doing hardly anything about it. That to me shows how the extent to which the government looks at all of us.
Yeah, it's funny. I see the only times that like sexual assaults or any of that kind of stuff actually gets taken on is if it's small. If it's like somebody who's one of the lower type, if it happens from like somebody who's a high-ranking officer or something like that, it's so much harder.
It's a good old boy system.
Yeah, it really is. And I think that happens anywhere. That happens in private companies, I think.
Definitely.
Too.
It happens. It's natural.
Yeah, exactly. So it's something that's really hard to combat. And I mean, how do you fix that kind of stuff? Like, you got to have some kind of third-party neutral person to make the judgment calls on it, and that's something that the government doesn't
that's
have.
what the free market does. In the free market, you have a third party, a fourth party, a fifth party, you have thousands of parties. When you decide if you're going to a different city just to figure out where you want to eat breakfast, right? There's like 1,000 parties weighing in on this to help you make that decision.
Right.
Yeah, it's funny that with that stuff with like say private militaries, like security contracting companies, because there's some very powerful security contracting companies out there. But you know what they do that the U.S. military doesn't, or they don't do that the U.S. military does, is they hire the most qualified people, which are usually your ex-military guys in general, and they don't hire women to go do security stuff.
Right.
Like they don't do it
because HR violations are a thing and lawsuits.
Yeah, and
that's actually not 100% true. I mean, there's a lot of private security that actually will favor women for certain roles. Most common, of course, being protecting women, right?
Yeah, I guess you're true. Yeah, I'm only going off of private or personal experiences. You don't hardly see any women working. Well, I mean, not even women, because the only really the guys that you see working private military contracts where they're actually like doing the role of like not logistical stuff are these fucking huge dudes that were like Navy SEALs or something like that. Like these hardcore dudes that are just probably built from a different breed of people. Like that's who security contractors are.
Yeah, but they're also looking for people who are really into it. You know, they're not like recruiting cannon fodder, right?
Right.
Like a private military contractor is not trying to have like half their skilled staff get killed.
Yeah, exactly.
They're
good money. They don't want to waste those resources.
Yeah.
So what makes you not like the military? I guess
it's not that I dislike the military in the sense that I dislike the people in the military. The people in the military, I have a huge amount of sympathy for. I mean, to me, I'm sorry that they're over there. They're stuck in a horrible place. I want them back. And I want them to never go back again. And I want them to help advise other people to never go in the first place. What the military is doing as an organization, it's just morally wrong. You know, if you go to somebody else's country and start shooting at them and they shoot back, and then you can't claim self-defense anymore. No. Like you're going there and you're just killing people. And
that's
it's
a hard pill for a lot of people to swallow.
It is like to say like it's really easy to say that you don't like the military and not nuance it, because there really is, like, you can be against American imperialism and still support the people that are in the military. The people and the actual organization are two completely different things.
And when I say support, doesn't mean I agree with what they're doing, right? So simple example, like I don't use drugs, I don't support drugs, and if I see somebody that's having a very difficult time breaking an addiction, I want them to break the addiction, right? And so in that sense, I support them as a person. And if they slip up, I still continue to support them as a person, right? I still say, like, listen, you've made a mistake. I still support you as a person. I'm still here for you. But that doesn't mean I support this action, right?
Right.
And that's like, those of us, especially those who work in education, counseling, you see that a lot. You can say, I often say to a student, like, it's not like I say, it's more like you communicate indirectly, right? This idea that you're there for them, even if they make a mistake, but doesn't mean you encourage the mistake, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And in the same way, for all of our, our fellow men and women who are in the military right now, you made a mistake. It's a big mistake. It is a big, giant, immoral mistake. We're still here for you because we still care about you as people, but that doesn't mean we agree with your mistake and want you to keep doing it.
Yeah, it's almost like I see it more as like a necessary evil. Maybe it's like a bad word to choose for it, but it's like if we didn't have people that volunteer to go do all the bullshit like imperialism stuff, they would just draft. The U.S. government would, and they have the power to do it. They had the power to do it forever. It's like, what are you gonna do? Like, and then now we're gonna get into the real like the stuff like that nobody wants to think about type of stuff. If we're gonna say, well, what are we gonna do about it? Because it all goes back into the argument that the U.S. government has too much power. I mean, they would just draft.
Yeah, but I think that again, like that, and people talk about this in a lot of the, I've read this interesting article about sexual assault where when you advise somebody, and I not to say I disagree with it's a complicated issue, right? But basically, someone's saying if you advise somebody, if your way to deal with sexual assault is to dress more conservatively or something, you're basically saying assault someone else. And that's not what we're about, right? And I didn't agree with every part of the article, but I thought that the author made a good point, which is when we say things like, well, at least you enlist so I don't have to get drafted, you're basically telling the government, damage somebody else, harm somebody else, take advantage of somebody else, don't take advantage of me. And that's not really a position that I'm very comfortable with. To me, what they're doing is wrong. And whether they do something wrong to me, obviously at a personal level, I prefer that they don't do something wrong to me directly. But there's still this idea of moral courage that says, I'm going to stand up to try to make sure that you don't do something wrong to anybody, not to me, not to my neighbor, not to somebody else that I met. And sending people overseas on a pointless, corrupted, no end in sight having mission that's just there to sell weapons and make a few contractors rich. We need to stop that for everybody. And so if they had a draft, well, then I would refuse if I was in the age range. And if refusing was an option, I would run. And if running was an option, I would hide. And if hiding was an option, I would shoot back.
Yeah, because it really is like all the wars in the Middle East. I don't see like I'm not blindfolded to it, even though I was in the military. Like I know it was just there to protect like. It was for U.S. interests. Like if you want to look at it from just a purely strategic point of view, it's just U.S. government wanting to control stuff that makes like the U.S. government more powerful. Like the governments have done it literally since the beginning of time.
Oh,
like,
isn't it crazy how we have an opioid crisis after we've been in Afghanistan for 20 years?
You literally would see videos of Marines like guarding poppy fields and and
we're not talking about the character from Trolls. We're talking about heroin.
Yeah. So
I mean, what interest? I mean, if you want to buy oil, just buy oil from whoever has it. Buy oil from Iran. Buy oil from Syria. I don't care. Buy oil from ISIS. The point is, you take the worst terrorist on earth, you put them in the free market, and a few months, weeks, years later, they're a businessman who's trying to serve their customers, right? And
that's the theory with the cartels and the drug war. That if you legalize it and you put them in the free market where they have to compete instead of going underground and everything.
Let them compete.
Because it's not, I mean, if they're doing the things where they're murdering people or kidnapping, it's a completely different issue. Legitimate businessmen don't do that.
Well,
and it's not effective.
No, you can't run a business like that.
I think there will always be some kind of black market out there. It's just more of like, what are we willing to let be in the black market because it doesn't make us have to do a lot of
you
can
still buy from your street dealer in Colorado.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I was talking to some friends who were talking about setting up a farm, and they were saying, well, plants are easy to deal with. Livestock is kind of annoying to deal with. But kidnapping is, I assume, even more annoying to deal with than livestock. When it comes to drugs, growing marijuana, I don't know, maybe there's some trick to it. I've never done it myself, but it doesn't sound to me as difficult as kidnapping. And the idea is let people spend their energy on, they want to make weed, fine, make the best weed possible. I'm not going to use it. I'm not going to encourage people to use it, but use your energy in something useful.
You've never done weed before?
No.
Do you drink at all, or?
No, I don't drink either.
Oh, so he's like clean living.
Yeah,
It's impressive.
I
Well,
believe
you know,
clean living, that's true.
when you bring up the cartels, though, like I think the cartels are almost like the military is, where it's like a lot of people join the cartels because they don't have like any other, maybe not the military, but like people join the cartels like in these countries because they don't have any other alternative. Like it's like, well, if there's one, I'm gonna do what it takes to make money, and it's like, this is clearly the best way of doing it.
Yeah, but it's not that same desperation. There's pride of being in a cartel. There's pride in America of being in a gang. Mm-hmm. You know, when ICE is out recruiting, they do the same thing the military does here, which is they go after, you know, young men who don't know what other options there are. You know, it's not that the people who join the military don't have other options. They just might not know about the other options because the military is just dominating the advertising airwaves with their one bad option.
And I'll agree with that, because it does disturb me to see military recruiters in high schools where they're selling these kids on these adventures and all this shit they're going to do. And then you end up cleaning a bathroom in Somalia.
Yeah, well, you know what they actually do try to sell them on? They try to sell them on the GI Bill. Like that's I think the biggest selling point of the military is that the fact that they'll just pay your way through college.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you're looking at it just of like a regular dude that like doesn't really care about much, and he just looks like, oh heck, I'll go 3 years, I'll go work at a desk or something, or I'll go, like you said, clean bathrooms in Somalia to get free college. Heck yeah, I'm gonna go do it.
And see, that's the thing. You know, people talk about how the government's actions have accidentally driven up the cost of college. That's no accident. They're trying to make it unaffordable, because you're right. The GI Bill is such a powerful draw, and it becomes more powerful the more you make college unaffordable. They want it to be unaffordable. They're not that dumb. This is economics like not even 101. This is like 001 level economics.
That's an interesting way of looking at it. I never thought of it like that, man. Like, yeah, maybe the government is just pushing up the price of it so people go and join the military.
That's actually,
But it's kind of weird though too, because I mean, like 5-6 years ago, like the big stink about being in the military is that they were trying to cut down numbers, and like they were doing it in just ridiculous ways. Like
you can't have tattoos on your forearms.
Yeah, they were cutting people out because of tattoos, because of like
now I can't get drafted, bitches.
Shit, if they're doing a draft, they don't care about that.
I'm too old to get drafted. They'll go after my brother.
It'd be like the military was like when they first started invading Iraq, like where they were just like, no, you know what? You got 2 arms and legs. Come on, you ain't got 2 arms and legs. We'll find something for you to do.
Forget that. You know those.
But now it's like they can't even hit their targets, right? Like the military is not hitting its recruit. They've lowered the targets. You're right about that. They've lowered the targets, and they can't hit the lower targets. And people have said, well, it's because the economy is doing better. That's nonsense. It's not like other low-wage jobs are not getting people to sign up for them. It's police and it's military that's being hurt the most, because in the information age, it is harder to tell a large-scale lie and have anyone believe it.
Yeah, look at like what the U.S. government's trying to do right now with Iran. Like they're trying to say, oh, they shot down our spy planes. They're going to do it more. And it's like if literally everybody's just like giving the U.S. government like.
And love him or hate him, you got to applaud Trump. I mean, for backing out, saying, I'm not going to kill 150 people over a robot.
You think it would have killed 4 people though? 5 people? Like,
I mean, maybe. But like it's the same logic as this guy hit my car in an accident, so I'm going to get out and shoot him. It's the same logic.
Yeah, exactly.
He broke my shit, so I'm going to kill him. It's not right.
I think maybe like 20 years ago you might have been able to sell that bullshit, but right now,
actually no, because our drone was in their country, so it's like my car was parked illegally in this guy's driveway, and then he hit it. And now I'm going to go kill him.
I parked my car in that guy's kitchen, and then he broke it. What a bastard!
Yeah, now I'm going to go kill him.
Yeah, no, that's it. Literally, exactly what it's like, man.
What it is.
But
don't put your drones in somebody else's airspace. Why is this like? I mean, if there's an Iranian drone over here. If there's a Canadian drone over my house, like a Canadian military drone, I'd shoot at it. I don't care. Yeah. It's no business being here.
On the principle that it's a Canadian drone. Yeah. But like I think look at like how the world was different back in like when the Iraqi war kicked off. Like I mean, the internet wasn't really that.
Second one.
Well, yeah, not after the Gulf War. Like
both of them. Yeah, we didn't have the information age. We didn't have information saturation. Like the mainstream media still controlled information. They weren't trying to label every single libertarian podcast as fake news or whatever they're doing now. They weren't trying to deplatform everybody at the time because no one even had the platform to be deplatformed from yet.
Right.
I mean, the fact that a lot of us have been deplatformed I don't like it, but it is a better problem than the old problem when none of us had a platform to be knocked off of.
Yeah, that's true.
Like with Alex Jones and guys like that.
Yeah, Alex Jones has like always been around. He'd been around back then too. He just started getting too much of a following.
Yeah, he's a survivor.
Yeah.
There was the thing that came out about the kiddie porn or whatever. I think that's like way blown out of proportion.
What?
So he had the Sandy Hook lawsuit that's going on. He had to he had to forward over all his emails to prove he wasn't harassing people. And they took the contents of his spam email where, I mean, I'm sure if you go through all of our spam emails, there's going to be some nasty shit in there. And people had sent him links that he didn't open to child porn. And the lawyers for the parents released, Alex Jones sent us child porn. And that's not what it is.
That's how it is with lawyers, man. They literally claw like anything they can get.
He's an idiot for not deleting that file. Before we get out of here, we got like 5 minutes left. We've had a guest bring it up on our show before, so I wanted to give you a chance to clear the air on it. There was a screenshot in regards to the age of consent law going around where someone said, okay, you win the libertarian purist thing. And they said, would you, Arvin Vohra, sleep with a 14-year-old that consented? And you said probably not. So I wanted to give you a chance to clear the air on that.
Now, what's interesting about that quote, and just to answer your question, no. But what's interesting about that quote is it's been repeated so often that I'd forgotten the original quote. Somebody showed me the original. The whole sentence is probably not, but I would not force my views on somebody else. So the emphasis there is that I would not force my views on somebody else. Like if somebody offered me marijuana, would I take it? Probably not, but I'm not going to force you to not smoke marijuana if you want to.
Right.
And so I remember that, people ask, why did you say probably not instead of no? It's simple because I wanted to drag it out. I couldn't say, like, if I said yes, that would simply be false.
Right.
And I don't want to lie to everybody. Probably not. To me, at least, it's honest.
It's like, honestly, too, if you would have just been like, no, then that's like what the media does, where they try to stranglehold people into like saying, apologizing for something. And it's like,
and the thing is, like, somebody could come up with like some lurid, elaborate situation, like, well, what if there's only one person left on the earth and it's just you and this person, you have to repopulate and you're going to be killed in 1 year? And well, I don't know, fine, sure. In that bizarre circumstance, but in a normal circumstance, no.
Oh, okay.
I mean, why like that? Not in any normal circumstance. Yeah, no, that's not a thing that normal people do.
Yeah, that's like the kind of conversation you have with like your buddy when you're like out just to drink a beer. It's like, all right, bro, let me hear this. Let me give you this scenario, man. Like, all right,
16-year-old niece. Yeah, what are you gonna do?
What do you do, man?
Whoa, why are you?
And so those are the things, right? I mean, it is an important issue to have. To me, I think that there's a lot more discussion on that topic. The idea that we should avoid it because it's emotional is exactly wrong. Think of it. It is emotional for all of us. It is emotional when I think it's an emotional thing. I have a younger sister. It's emotional.
Yeah.
When you think about that, the fact that it's emotional lets you know that's the right place to be looking. The things that have no emotion to them, like soda taxes, those aren't the central issues. Those are not the political or philosophical issues that really matter. The real issues are the ones you can follow your own emotional compass. The things that trigger you, those are the important issues.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, that's about it.
Dude, that was a really good
episode.
Thanks
for coming on, man.
Thanks.
My pleasure. I appreciate you guys having me on here.
Anything you want to plug before we take off?
Yeah, check out my website, votevohra.com. If you want to be involved in this campaign, there's so much that we're doing. There's so much more that we can do. We have door knockers, radio ads, signs, like however you want to participate. There's so much we can do to change American culture. And I promise you this, if I'm the nominee, you will have as many people in America knowing about jury nullification, knowing that it brought freedom of the press to America, and knowing that they can do that, and which would therefore basically end the drug war by itself. That's if I'm just the nominee and lose. Mm-hmm. You're going to have at least that many people, as many people who now know where Aleppo is thanks to Gary Johnson. He will bring that message to the American people.
I think the message needs to be that I'm not going to bomb Aleppo.
Yeah, exactly, right.
That's what the message needs to be. Yeah. All right. Well, Arvin Vohra, everybody. Thank you for coming on. I think he's very misunderstood. We had a very interesting conversation.
Good hour,
very
man.
sensible discussion. So thanks, man. Peace out.
All right. See you guys.